The morning my roommate confessed the truth, the sunlight was pouring through our kitchen window like nothing bad could ever happen there. But I remember the way his hands shook around the coffee mug, the way his eyes avoided mine, and the way one sentence from him made the entire world I had built for myself fall apart and come back together in a completely different shape. Before that day, I thought I knew what pain was. I thought pain was losing your job, eating cheap noodles for dinner, smiling at people who never noticed you were breaking, and sleeping 3 feet away from unpaid bills on a mattress that sagged in the middle. But I didn't know real pain until my roommate, Caspian Vale, looked at me across our tiny apartment table and said that he had been carrying a secret about my life for almost 2 years. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that can happen when broken people finally tell the truth, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Lifeline Hub. Sometimes one story can remind us that even the heaviest hearts can still be healed. My name is Rowan Hale, and for most of my 20s, I lived like someone who had already lost before the race even started. By day, I worked at a small print shop on Ashford Avenue, lifting boxes of paper, fixing jammed machines, and smiling at customers who complained about colors being one shade too light. By night, I came home to a 4th-floor apartment that smelled like old wood, instant coffee, and rain whenever the windows leaked. It was not much, but it was mine, or at least half mine. The other half belonged to Caspian, a quiet man with tired eyes and a habit of helping without making a show of it. Caspian had moved in after answering my desperate online post for a roommate. I expected someone loud, messy, or strange, but he arrived on a bright Tuesday morning wearing a faded gray jacket, carrying 2 suitcases and a cardboard box full of books. He was polite, almost too polite, and he paid the first month's rent in cash before I even asked. At first, we lived like strangers sharing walls. We nodded in the hallway, split groceries, and left notes on the fridge about electricity bills and laundry detergent. But slowly, life softened around us. He started making extra tea when he noticed I came home exhausted. I started saving the corner slice of pizza because he liked it most. We became something close to family without ever saying the word. Still, Caspian had shadows around him. Some mornings, I found him standing by the window long after sunrise, staring down at the street like he was waiting for someone who would never come. He never talked about his past. He never brought friends over. He never answered certain phone calls. Whenever I asked if he was okay, he would smile gently and say he was just thinking. I understood that kind of answer because I had my own locked rooms inside me too. My locked room was my mother. Her name was Mireia, and she had raised me alone after my father vanished before I was old enough to remember his voice. She worked 2 jobs, cleaned office floors at night, and still somehow made breakfast every morning like the world had not been cruel to her. When she died suddenly from a stroke, I was 24 and completely unprepared for the silence she left behind. After her funeral, I discovered debt, overdue notices, and a storage unit filled with boxes I could not afford to keep. Everything from my childhood disappeared in pieces because grief does not pause for rent. The one question that haunted me most was why my father never came back. My mother had never said much about him except that he was not ready to be a family. I hated him for that. I hated his absence, his cowardice, and the empty chair at every school event. I told myself I did not need him. But some wounds do not care what we tell ourselves. They stay. 2 years after Caspian moved in, everything began to change on an ordinary daytime morning in late spring. The city was awake and bright. Children were walking to school with backpacks bouncing against their shoulders. A delivery truck beeped outside. Someone in the building was frying onions. I had taken the day off because the print shop owner, Mr. Pruitt, said business was slow and he could not pay everyone full hours. I sat at the kitchen table, pretending not to worry about money, while Caspian stood by the counter with 2 cups of coffee. He looked different that morning. Pale. Restless. Like he had been fighting a war before I even woke up. He placed my cup in front of me but did not sit. Then he took a folded envelope from his jacket pocket and laid it on the table between us. My name was written on it in careful handwriting I did not recognize. At first, I thought it was about rent. Maybe he was moving out. Maybe he had lost his job too. I almost laughed from nerves, but then I saw tears in his eyes. Caspian Vale, the man who never broke, was standing in our sunlit kitchen with his face full of guilt. He told me he had known my mother. The words did not make sense at first. I stared at him, waiting for the rest of the sentence to fix what he had just broken. He said he had met Mireille years ago, when he worked as a courier for a legal office. He said she had been searching for someone, trying to locate records, old addresses, any trace of the man who had left her with a baby. She had wanted answers not for herself, but for me. She wanted me to know where I came from. I could barely breathe. Caspian kept speaking, slowly, painfully, as if every word cut him on the way out. He told me my mother had found my father, but not the story she expected. My father had not simply abandoned us. He had been arrested after taking blame for a crime connected to his younger brother. He had written letters from prison, letters my mother never received because they had been sent to an old address. Years later, when he was released, he came looking for us, but by then my mother had moved, changed jobs, and disappeared into survival. He died in a construction accident before he could find her again. The room tilted. For years, I had built my anger like a wall. I had needed someone to blame because grief felt too wide without a target. Now Caspian was telling me that the villain in my story might have been another broken person trapped by bad choices, bad timing, and silence. Then came the confession that changed everything. Caspian had been hired by my mother shortly before she died to help organize the documents she had gathered. After her death, he was supposed to deliver the envelope to me. Inside were copies of my father's letters, a photo, and a note from my mother explaining what she had learned. But Caspian never delivered it. He said when he found me, I was drowning in grief, debt, and loneliness. He had planned to give it to me after a week, then after a month, then after I seemed stronger. Instead, he answered my roommate ad under his real name, moved in, and stayed because he was afraid the truth would destroy me. Anger rose in me so fast I could taste metal. I stood up, knocking the chair backward. The apartment that had felt safe suddenly felt like a stage where everyone had known the script except me. He had watched me cry on the anniversary of my mother's death. He had heard me curse my father's name. He had sat beside me through birthdays and rent scares and lonely holidays while carrying the one thing that could have changed how I understood my entire life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the envelope at him. Instead, I asked him why he had done it, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Caspian said he was a coward. He said he had lost his own sister years earlier after hiding a truth from her too long, and when he saw me breaking, he convinced himself silence was kindness. Then he admitted the part that hurt the most. He had not stayed only because of guilt. He stayed because our apartment became the first home he had felt in years. He had been selfish. He had let my need for a roommate become his chance at forgiveness. I left the apartment without opening the envelope. I walked for hours under a bright white sky, past bakeries, bus stops, flower stalls, and laughing strangers. Daytime made everything worse because the world looked too normal for a life-changing confession. I ended up in a small park where my mother used to take me when I was little. I sat on a bench beneath a jacaranda tree and finally opened the envelope with trembling hands. The first letter was from my father. His name was Oren Valles. He wrote like a man trying to hold his child through paper. He said he had made terrible mistakes, but leaving me was never one of his choices. He described the day I was born, how tiny my hand looked around his finger, how my mother cried when I opened my eyes. He wrote that if I grew up hating him, he would understand, but he hoped one day I would know I had been loved from the beginning. There were more letters, each one dated years apart, each one full of birthdays he missed, apologies he could not deliver, and hope that somehow survived concrete walls and loneliness. Then I found my mother's note. Her handwriting nearly broke me. She wrote that she had been wrong to let bitterness shape the story. She said she had been hurt, proud, exhausted, and afraid that telling me the truth would reopen wounds she did not know how to heal. But she wanted me to have the choice she never gave me. She wanted me to forgive only if I was ready, but she begged me not to let anger become my inheritance. By the time I finished reading, the sun had shifted and my shirt was damp with tears. For the first time in years, my father became real to me. Not perfect. Not innocent. Not magically restored. But human. And somehow, that hurt more than hatred ever had. When I returned to the apartment, Caspian was sitting on the hallway floor outside our door. He looked like he had been there for hours. He stood when he saw me, but he did not ask for forgiveness. That mattered. He simply said he would move out by the end of the week and pay his share of rent through the month. His voice was quiet, defeated, and I realized that the confession had cost him the only home he had too. For 3 days, we barely spoke. The apartment became a museum of all the small kindnesses I did not know how to remember anymore. His mug sat beside the sink. His books lined the shelf. The extra tea he made for me went cold on the counter. I wanted to hate him cleanly, but human beings are rarely kind enough to be only one thing. Caspian had betrayed me. He had also sat beside me at the hospital when I had pneumonia. He had fixed the heater in winter. He had found me work when the print shop cut my hours. He had been wrong, but he had not been empty. On the 4th morning, something happened that forced me to stop running from the truth. Mr. Pruitt called and told me the print shop was closing. Just like that, my job was gone. I sat on the kitchen floor, surrounded by unpaid bills, my father's letters, and the sharp terror of not knowing what came next. Caspian found me there. He did not touch me. He did not offer empty comfort. He just sat on the floor across from me and said that he knew a small community center looking for someone to manage their printing and outreach materials. He had already called, but he would only give me the contact if I wanted it. No pressure. No debt. No pretending it fixed anything. I almost refused out of pride. But my mother's note was on the table, and her words about anger becoming an inheritance would not leave me alone. So I took the number. The community center was called Harbor Lighthouse, and it sat on a sunny corner near the old train station. They helped people who were starting over, single parents, former prisoners, young adults aging out of foster care, families one paycheck from homelessness. The director, a warm but firm woman named Samira Cade, interviewed me in a room filled with donated chairs and children's drawings. She asked why I wanted the job. I could have given a polished answer, but instead I told her the truth. I said I knew what it felt like to be one envelope, one bill, one silence away from falling apart. She hired me that afternoon. Work at Harbor Light changed me slowly. I printed flyers for food drives, repaired old computers, helped people fill out forms, and listened to stories that made my own grief feel less lonely. I met a man who had spent 10 years trying to reconnect with his daughter. I met a mother who cried because someone donated school shoes for her son. I met people who were guilty, innocent, ashamed, hopeful, and afraid. The world became less divided between good people and bad people. It became full of people carrying consequences. Caspian still planned to leave, but the apartment felt different after I started the new job. We spoke carefully at first, then honestly. He told me about his sister, Amara, who had begged him for help years ago when she was trapped in an abusive relationship. He had minimized her fear because he did not want to confront the man hurting her. By the time he understood, she was gone from his life, not dead, but unreachable, and he had never forgiven himself. When he found my mother's envelope and saw my grief, he froze in that same old fear. He thought delay was protection. It was not. It was fear wearing a gentle mask. One afternoon, under the same kitchen sunlight where everything had shattered, I asked Caspian to stay until he found a real place, not just some desperate room across town. He looked at me as if I had handed him back his life. I told him I had not forgiven him completely, not yet. Trust would have to be rebuilt in small honest steps. But I also told him I was tired of losing people to silence. Months passed. I kept reading my father's letters, one at a time, never rushing. Some days they comforted me. Some days they made me angry all over again. Healing was not a straight road. It was more like walking through a house after a storm, finding broken glass in rooms you thought were already clean. But I began to feel my life widening. I visited my father's grave on a clear Saturday morning. I brought no flowers, only one of his letters and a photograph of my mother. I stood there for a long time, feeling foolish, sad, and strangely peaceful. I told him I did not know how to love a stranger, but I was willing to stop hating him. For that day, it was enough. Near the end of that year, Harbor Light held a daytime charity event in the courtyard. Sunlight covered the folding tables. Children ran between balloons. Volunteers served soup, bread, and lemonade. I had designed the posters, printed the banners, and organized the donation cards. Caspian came to help set up chairs. He looked lighter than he had when I first met him, though still quiet in the way people are when they know joy can be fragile. During the event, a woman arrived at the registration table and froze when she saw him. She had sharp eyes, silver earrings, and the same careful sadness in her face. It was Amara. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Caspian stepped forward, shaking, and apologized without excuses. He did not ask her to forget. He did not ask her to make him feel better. He only told the truth. I watched his sister cry in the middle of that bright courtyard, and I understood that confessions do not always repair what was broken, but they can unlock the door where healing begins. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps Lifeline Hub bring more emotional stories of forgiveness, kindness, and second chances to people who may need them more than you know. That evening, after the event ended and the courtyard emptied, I sat alone on the community center steps with a paper cup of lemonade in my hand. Caspian sat beside me, leaving respectful space between us. The sky was golden. The city sounded softer than usual. He asked if I ever wished he had never moved in. I thought about the envelope, the lies, the anger, the letters, my mother's note, my father's grave, Harbor Light, Amara, and the strange painful path that had led us both back to ourselves. I told him the truth. I wished he had given me the envelope on the first day. I wished my mother had told me sooner. I wished my father had found us. I wished many things had been different. But I did not wish I had never known him. Because sometimes the person who breaks your life open is also the person standing there when you begin to rebuild it. Special request: comment truth can heal if you believe that honesty, forgiveness, and kindness can change a life forever. I still keep my father's letters in a wooden box beside my bed. My mother's note is folded on top. Some mornings, when sunlight enters my room, I read a few lines and remember that love does not always arrive in the form we wanted. Sometimes it arrives late. Sometimes it arrives damaged. Sometimes it comes through a confession that hurts so badly you think it will destroy you. But if you let the truth breathe, if you refuse to let bitterness become your home, life can surprise you. My roommate's confession changed my life forever, not because it erased the past, but because it gave me the courage to face it, forgive what I could, and step into a future I never thought I deserved.